Hello, this is Rick Broker from CloudBees. Today I want to talk about how to manage your mainframe releases with CDRO and Endevor. CDRO has a way of building procedures to talk to the Endevor instances on your mainframe. If you implement the REST API on that, and I'm going to kind of show you how that might look and if you wanted to do that yourself. So let's start with CDRO. So I'm in CDRO here, and we have a couple of release pipelines. But before we start looking at those this pipelines, let's look at what I might have to implement in order to do this. So I have just implemented a smattering of procedures that you might want to leverage as part of your Endevor integration with CDRO. So like I said, it has a REST API pack, so I have created a number of procedures here. And so let's just take a look at one of them really quick to see how that might be implemented. So this is a procedure. It has one step. If we go over here and look at the parameters we're going to pass in, we see the actual number of parameters that will get passed in that are required by the REST API for Endevor. So if you're familiar with that REST API, you'll recognize a lot of these properties here. And of course, I have the base URL, which is going to be where I'm looking at running my Endevor REST API instance. And I've tied that to the possibility of adding a credentials object from CDRO. This means that I can store my credentials in CDRO or in some sort of external credential provider such as HashiCorp Vault. Now, the details of the procedure, I've implemented these things in Groovy, and Groovy does a good job as far as pulling in the parameters from here and executing a REST API. So we have a number of steps here where I'm basically taking the parameters that we got passed in, and I'm converting the URL and coding those things, and then we have inside this try block here the basic logic of what we're going to do. So we're going to post or put or get that onto that REST API the data that we collected from the parameters as input parameters, and then output that is going to be sent out to a reason code and a response code, and all that information is actually going to get stored as properties in CDRO, so we can actually use that someplace else in the pipeline if we wanted to do that. So that's basically how we're implementing it. So let's take a look at actually running one of those things in CDRO and see what happens here. So we can go back up here and we can go to the release orchestration, and we can go to pipelines. And so I'm just going to run this mainframe pipeline here. But before we do that, let's take a look at it. So basically, this is a pipeline that I would normally use as part of a release. And this pipeline has the idea of doing a break fix, as well as proving the package from CDRO into Endevor, and then deploying that package. And then I've added this idea of break fixing. So right now I've tied this into working with ServiceNow, and then we can actually deploy that to the next environment using those packages as well. And then when we're done, we close the incident ticket. Now, the interesting thing here, if we look at one of these deployments, I'm actually using the bring your own deployer here. So what we can do is we can actually run this package. We'll actually deploy the thing using the bring your own deployer, and then it'll actually show up as it was getting deployed. So before we do this, I'm going to actually I'm going to disable this one particular ServiceNow thing. So we'll disable that, so we won't worry about that as far as this deploy, and we'll disable this step because for our purposes here, we don't need to worry about these two things. And then we will just go through the deployment. We'll see actually what happens with CDRO. Okay, so I'm going to run this pipeline, and so we get this select an application. I'm going to do we'll call this 1.3.4, and I'm not going to worry about the incident ticket ID here. I'm going to deploy to both dev and prod. So we'll go ahead and run this, and it'll go through and run these things. Obviously, it's going to skip the steps that we have disabled, and it'll continue as we doing the deployment. And we can, as we do this, we can actually go and look into the inventory, and we can see that we've in fact deployed stuff. So remember, we deployed 1.3.4, and so if I go over here to the deployment automation and I look into inventory environment, I see 1.3.4. We have 1.2.0 that's actually still deployed in production because we haven't deployed there. So if I go back to my pipeline that I'm running and we look at pipeline runs, we're here. I'll go ahead and approve this gate, and then it'll go ahead and deploy that into the production environment for us. And then we can go back and we can validate that the inventory is updated for that as well. So there's a lot of ways that you can integrate things in CDRO that we don't necessarily have a plugin with, using this idea of procedures. So let's take, before we go on, let's take a look at the inventory for this guy again. And so we'll see in our inventory 134 here. So we've deployed all the way through to production. And then we'll go back to our pipeline, and pipeline runs, and we can see that we've completed this thing. So that's all I really wanted to cover as far as the deploying with CDRO using mainframes for today. If you want more information on this, I'm going to actually put the Endevor parts into the DSL samples, which you can find. There'll be a link in the description so you can leverage that later. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember, share it, like it with your friends. That's all. Have a good day.